We have the poses set and working, but we still have the timing of a vanilla walk cycle, which causes our animation to look as if it's still lacking something. And what we lack is the believable impression of weight. Our character is taking the steps quickly as if he didn't carry anything. When a person carries something heavy, he tends to take more time to get the foot off the ground, because gravity is pulling him even harder, so it's more difficult to take that step. And that's why we need to change the timing a little bit. We can do that by selecting all the controls. Let's also expand the timeline to, let's say, 35 frames, because we'll be needing more time to make the steps. When the character goes down to the ground from the contact pose to the lowest one, we want to keep that motion taking 3 frames as it currently does, because we want our character to come down quickly. That way we'll feel the weight being heavier, because the character will come down hard. Once the foot at the back comes off the ground, that's when we need to move the keys and give each of the poses more time. Let's select all the keyframes from frame 7 and move the whole group a frame later. Now let's select the keyframes from frame 11 and move them again 1 frame later. Repeat the same thing for the next pose as well. Now our character comes down to the ground quickly in 3 frames, and for each next pose, which is the passing pose, the highest pose, then the other contact pose, takes 4 frames. Then on the other side of the cycle, our character needs to plant the foot again quickly and go down in 3 frames, so let's leave it as it is. We can repeat the same process for the other poses again, only this time, since in my specific case on this part of the animation, the right foot was making a smaller step closer to the body than the left foot will be making. You can see that this step will be much wider, so this foot will take more time. And I'm going to move each pose not 1 frame later, but 2. You should decide what your timing will look like depending on your specific case. Perhaps you want to give each pose 5 frames, or maybe 4 frames. You decide what will work best for your animation. I'm going to move this group of frames 2 frames later, then this, and finally the last pose as well. So on this side of the cycle, the front foot comes down quickly in 3 frames. And then the other foot goes to its passing position in 5 frames, then to the highest position in 5 frames, and reaches the contact again in 5 frames. Let's see how that feels. Whoops! Don't forget that our animation takes 34 frames, and because we have the repeating pose at the end, we can shrink the timeline even to 33 frames to see the proper cycle. You can see how the steps now feel much heavier. So we know that the object that our character is carrying is heavy as well. This feels much more believable. I'm happy with the timing. Now what's left for us to do is polish the animation and give it a little bit more detail. For example, we can work more on the feet. Since currently it takes 3 frames for the foot to flatten down on the ground, which is too long, we should make it slam down quicker. We can also work on the knee pops. Here I see that the knee has changes in direction. We can add more rotations for the axe and the head in the X and Y axes, because currently we only have the rotation Z axis, which is going up and down, animated. It's best to leave such details, such as the head rotating in X and Y axis, for the very end of our animation, because then you have the full information of how the body is moving, so it's easier to overlap it. Same applies for the weapon or the tool that your character is carrying. We can also add some offset to the hands so that they don't feel as if they're cemented to the object. Let's not forget the fingers and add more tension to them. After all that, let's not forget to clean up the curves to give our animation final polish. I'm going to speed up the process now so that you can have the general idea of what the final polish details should be added. But since you're probably creating a little different animation than I am, you don't need to follow along with me. Just look for the steps that you think might improve your animation. All right. First, as I've mentioned before, I'm working on the foot slam to the ground, making it quicker. So I've zeroed out the foot roll in 2 frames after the contact. I'm also adding at the same time some overlap on the toes, so that our foot would be more flexible. My foot, when it's coming off the ground, slows out in translation Y channel because it takes more energy to push off the ground than to come down to it. That's why when we're planting the foot, it's speeding up at the end. I also want to lower the feet down in general because when we're carrying a heavy object, we don't lift up our feet very high. We're almost sliding them. Repeating the same thing for the opposite foot as well. Now I'm looking at the foot roll channel, checking if I can make it cleaner, while also looking at the knee and how it's moving, and whether it has small changes in direction. Making sure that we don't have any frames where the leg is overstretching. Here I've made a strange-looking curve shape, which for any other channel wouldn't work well, but it doesn't create any unwanted bumps in our heel raise motion, so the only thing I was concerned with was how my knee was moving, and having this sort of curve on the foot roll channel has actually fixed my knee pops. Now I'm following the other knee motion and its path, trying to fix any knee pops by making changes in the foot roll channel. The feet motion looks fine. Let's move on to the hands. Here, I already have the right arm animated in the translation X channel, going forward and backward on the lowest and highest poses, that way overlapping the axe. The left hand I've animated in the translation Z channel, going left and right on the contact poses, because I didn't want both my hands to have the same motion, and the movement itself is very subtle in the hand. You can barely see it, but it definitely adds more believability to the animation. I've also animated the fingers, holding the axe sometimes tighter and sometimes a little easier. Same for the thumbs. I'm just adding these small details which make our animation look more alive and not so robotic. Finally, I'm adding the pre-infinity and post-infinity curve motion to all my controls. Then checking every single control and all of its channels, looking at the shape of the curve, whether it has any bumps that need to be fixed, rotating the handles in some places to create a better flow of the curve. I also look at the general motion of my walk cycle and look for the things that perhaps need to be toned down a bit, like my chest was swinging too much left and right. Meanwhile, while we carry a heavy object in our arms, our chest gets stiffer, trying to balance out the weight. All right, so here is my polished walk cycle with a prop. I think the timing works well. We can feel that the object is heavy. We have some overlap on the axe, as well as the head, and the walk has more character than the vanilla walk cycle. While creating this type of walk cycle, the most important things to remember are to be careful and patient when setting up the constraint system for your chosen object. If you do it right, it will save you time later. Find the reference or create it yourself. It will help your work tremendously. And while creating the poses off your reference, be broad. Don't be distracted by too many details. I hope you had fun creating these animations. This was our last lesson, and I hope to see you in other courses.